Oh, me and me cousin one Arthur McBride, as we went walking down by the seaside. Now mark what followed and what did betide, for it being on Christmas morning, out for recreation we went on a tramp, and we met Sergeant Napper and Corporal Vamp, and a little wee drummer intending to camp, for the day being pleasant and charming. Good morning, the sergeant did cry, and the same to you gentlemen we did reply, intending no harm, but meant to pass by, for it being on Christmas morning. What says he, my fine fellows, if you will enlist, it's 10 guineas in gold I will slip in your fist, and a crown in the bargain for to kick up the dust and drink the king's health in the morning. For a soldier he leads a very fine life, and he always is blessed with a charming young wife, and he pays all his debts without sorrow or strife, and always lives pleasant and charming. And a soldier he always is decent and clean, in the finest of clothing he's constantly seen, while other poor fellows go dirty and mean, and sup on thin gruel in the morning. What says Arthur? I wouldn't be proud of your clothes, for you've only the length of them, as I suppose, and you dare not change them one night, for you know if you do you'll be flogged in the morning. And although that we are single and free, we take great delight in our own company, and we have no desire strange faces to see, although that your offers are charming. And we have no desire to take your advance, all hazards and dangers we bar to your own chance, for you would have no scruples for to send us to France, where we would get shot without warning. Oh, now, says the sergeant, I'll have no such chat, and I neither will take it from spalpeen or brat, for if you insult me with one other word, I'll cut off your heads in the morning. And then Arthur and I, we soon drew our hearts, and we scarce gave them time for to draw their own blades, when a trusty shillelagh came over their heads and bade them take that as fair warning. And their own rusty rapiers that hung by their side, we flung them as far as we could in the tide. Now take them out, devils, cried Arthur McBride, and tempered their edge in the morning. And the little wee drummer, we flattened his pow, and we made a football of his rowdy-dow-dow. Threw it in the tide for to rock and to roll, and bade it a tedious returning. And we haven't no money, paid them off in cracks, and we paid no respect to their two bloody backs, for we lathered them there like a pair of wet sacks, and left them for dead in the morning. And so, to conclude and to finish disputes, we obligingly asked if they wanted recruits. For we were the lads who would give them hard clouts and bid them look sharp in the morning. Oh, me and me cousin one Arthur McBride, as we went walking down by the seaside. Now mark what followed and what did betide, for it being on Christmas morning.
Hello, my friends. How's everybody doing tonight? I decided to start with the old Arthur McBride by Paul Brady, since I'll be talking about Keith Woods for a little while, the Irishman, Keith Woods. And hopefully in the spirit of Arthur McBride, after having a bloody fight, they can reconcile in the end and put our differences aside and work together for our own people. So tonight we're going to talk about something that happened on Twitter today, an interaction between Keith Woods and I, and the apology that I gave to him. And I'm going to explain why I apologized to Keith Woods, despite the fact that I remain very staunchly critical of a number of key positions that he has taken and probably continues to take. So we'll talk about that. And then we will talk about the argument that Adam Green had with Jay Dyer on Twitter, because I think they were discussing Jay Dyer's transcendental argument for God. So a little bit of a abstract philosophy here, which I find fascinating, and I'd like to get into the weeds a little bit on that argument, because a couple streams ago I mentioned some of my old content was related to physics, and physics is closely interrelated with things like ontology and metaphysics and the fundamental questions of reality. So I have opinions that I developed over the course of many years on these topics, and I'm familiar with all of the arguments, including Jay Dyer's argument. And I want to look at how Adam Green responded, look at Jay Dyer's initial argument, and give my own opinions on what the best way to approach an argument like Jay Dyer's transcendental argument would be, in my opinion. And the third topic that I like to touch on tonight is the book When Scotland Was Jewish, which was pretty much a primary source that I used in the last live stream discussing the potential of Scotland having a long history of having a Jewish enclave, a crypto-Jewish enclave in their lowlands region. And so I want to talk about the critiques that I have found on that book and explain why I think they're inadequate, and sort of set up for one more follow-up stream that I'd like to do, and then we'll kind of close that topic and move on to other things. But I want to set up for an upcoming stream where I will go through the big picture, the totality of the evidence, the preponderance of evidence that I see on that question, and sort of summarize the whole book, or at least the key crucial parts of the argument in that book, and explain why I think, although the argument is a bit overstated in When Scotland Was Jewish. I still think that the authors are definitely onto something, and that it's, when you look at the big picture, when you see all of the evidence together, it's hard to deny that there must have been at least some important, significant presence of crypto Jews living in Scotland going all the way back to like the 1200s. So those are the three main topics that I'd like to get into tonight. Before I continue on, as always, can I get a check on my volume? It looks like people are responding to things I've said, so I'm going to assume that my volume and that everything's coming through good, and I will just carry on. So, if you followed my channel long enough, if you follow me on Twitter, let me switch over here to my other window. Oh, gosh. You know what? I'm going to have to set something else up here. I'm just going to do a display capture because my window capture doesn't seem to be working. Okay. Here we go. Here's the post on Adam Green. We'll talk about that in just a minute. Let's find what happened, the post with Keith Woods here. Okay. So if you've been following my channel for long enough, you know that I have criticized Keith Woods on a number of occasions in the past. We're talking years back. I've criticized him for what I perceive to be Marxist influence in his line of thinking. And I'm not going to go into the specifics of my critiques in this stream. I just want to explain to you why I felt humbled by his response and why I wanted to extend an olive branch and try to build a bridge rather than burn a bridge in this instance, despite the fact that I have critiqued him in the past. So yeah, there have been key issues that I've disagreed with him on. His interpretations of history in general, sort of his paradigm for explaining history in general, which I believe is like Marxist influenced. The way that he's kind of flirted with national Bolshevik type of thinking. And there's probably more than this, but the other main one that came to mind was his take on COVID, the lockdowns, the vaccines. He, during that time, during that era, seemed to be pro-lockdown, seemed to be pro-vax, and he talked a lot of stuff about, talked shit about conspiracy theorists and this and that. So, I'm obviously on the conspiracy theorist side, so to speak. I was anti-vax, anti-lockdown, skeptical of COVID in general, and I still hold those opinions. So there are some key things that we've disagreed on. But in the more recent period of his sort of development online, Keith Woods has rocketed into a position of prominence that he didn't really have before. Like somebody saying in the chat, Elon Musk was retweeting him, commenting on his posts in support. He, in recent times, if I'm not mistaken, he's been associated with or getting close to associating with Nick Fuentes and Paul Town, who I believe is an associate of Nick Fuentes. I don't follow it closely enough to really know all of these little intricacies of the social lives of far right influencers. But it's been interesting to see Keith Woods develop from being a small channel in the obscure corner of like far pro-white, dissident, right-wing YouTubers. And I'm talking, this is what, 2016, 2017, back when I was first starting my channel. So he's grown from that. And back in those times, I don't have any proof of this. I can't find any of the comments. So the only proof I have is my own memory. But I remember Keith Woods commenting in a positive way on some of my earliest videos before he got big. So I've always had sort of like a sense that he was a genuine guy from the start, and I've seen his channel grow from nothing to where he is today. And so despite the differences that he and I have ideologically, I've always hoped that he was a genuine guy and seen him as a genuine guy. And that's part of the reason why I even have offered the critiques that I have. I wouldn't go out of my way to offer multiple critiques on a single person out there if I didn't think that they were at least genuine, if I didn't think that they would at least, listen. So on one hand, I like deep down, I do hope and wish and believe personally that he's a genuine guy. So that's the one side of things. The other side of the issue is we have to acknowledge that there are infiltrators in this sphere online. We have to acknowledge that there are suspicious characters. And it has come out as a fact on multiple occasions that certain people have even admitted to getting involved in these circles in order to subvert or misdirect or dilute the message. One in particular that comes to mind is Jason Reza Giorgiani, who was one of the founders of the alt-right organization that, Richard Spencer was a part of, and Keith Woods was he associated with Richard Spencer for a while. And Jason Reza Giorgiani is out there admitting that one of his intentions in getting involved with the alt-right was to steer white people away from white identity politics. Then we have recently the whole thing with Lauren Chen that came out. I know she's not exactly dissident right, and Keith Woods has nothing to do with her, but just the fact that we have to be wary, we have to be a little suspicious, and one of my biases that I have to acknowledge is when somebody reaches a certain level of popularity or somebody has received a certain degree of promotion into what is approaching mainstream, I feel suspicious of it. I can't help but feel suspicious of it. And so it's easy for me, who spends a lot of time looking into history, who spends a lot of time, trying to suss out the crypto Jews and the spooks in history. It's easy for me to look at somebody as if they are one of these like characters that I'm reading about on Wikipedia instead of being a real person. And it's especially easy, as I will show you when I read these replies. This is kind of where I'm coming from. It's especially easy for me to sort of turn a person into a character in my mind when our interactions are mostly one-sided. Like I said, Keith Woods did leave comments on my channel early on, and we have had some small interactions, but for the most part, my critiques have been ignored or not addressed directly. I guess I'm really, be honest, I'm for somebody with as many followers as him, I'm not worth like a video response. So I get that. But when it's such a one-sided interaction, it's easy to make that person into sort of a one-dimensional caricature instead of recognizing them as a real person. And that's kind of what I was doing with Keith Woods. And so with all of that in mind, and also also keeping in mind the fact that I still hold on to my criticisms of him, I apologized when he showed me that I had basically accused him of being a spook, and I didn't even remember doing this. I did it so nonchalantly, so casually, without really considering the fact that I am being listened to, that this person can see what I'm writing, and that on some level it does matter what I'm saying, because I do have, as small as it is, a following, and I do have some influence on the conversation. I'm out there. So that's why I kind of put my foot in my mouth here. So let me just read it. I said, I wonder how long Keith has had me blocked. It's been a while since I checked his Twitter. I know I've criticized him before, but I've never harassed him or went out of my way to pester him, which is true. And even when I have criticized him, it's never been overly personal or mean-spirited. That part was not true, as we'll see. I remember when he first started out, he made very positive comments on my channel, kind of bizarre to me. And then I followed it up with something irrelevant, but here we go. Keith Woods responds, which I was not expecting. This follow-up is relevant because I basically said I don't think he'll respond. I'm too small to respond to. But he responded, and I appreciated that. So his response was, I'm fine with criticism or disagreement and tolerated it from you for years. Which I guess tolerated it is kind of a weird way to put it. He kind of ignored it, but what I'm not going to have in my feed is you publicly bad-jacketing me, or fed-jacketing, I thought the word was fed-jacketing, with no evidence. Extremely dishonorable. I notice you didn't mention that, though. And then he included a screenshot of a tweet that I made. My personal opinion, this is the end of the tweet, is that all the circumstantial evidence leads me to believe Stalin was Jewish. Okay, I still believe that. And the reason Keith defended the honor of his dear leader is because he sympathizes with Nazpol ideology and is likely on the payroll of people pushing Nazpol ideology. And this is true. I don't have any evidence of that. And when I saw him respond to that, I kind of viscerally felt that he was right. I kind of felt like, yeah, in like a split second, my mind calculated all of my options. And on one hand, I had the option to double down and say something like, yeah, well, you probably are a Fed, or you probably are a spook, or something like that. Double down and dig my heels in and just say, you know what, yeah, you are a spook, and then completely burn the bridge. And at the same time, what I could feel viscerally once again was make myself into a hypocrite. I felt like responding in that way after I just said up here that I never was overly personal or mean-spirited. I feel like acting in my initial post like, oh, I've done nothing wrong, I've never been personally insulting to him, I've never, attacked him as a person, and then being shown, yes, I have attacked him as a person, and then doubling down would make me a hypocrite. And I was like, damn, he's right. Like, I don't want to be a hypocrite. I shouldn't have said that. I admitted that it was a mistake. All the criticisms aside, everything I still believe, like here, Handsome Truth responded, he's a vax bro, he's cooked anyway. I still don't like a lot of his takes, and I still feel like there's so much that he's done that can be criticized, but I can't come on and say I've never personally attacked him and then get shown that I did and then double down. And it felt so hypocritical, and I had to admit that it was a mistake. So I responded, "Thanks for replying, Keith. I apologize humbly. Our people, the white race as a whole, are in trouble, and I think being unified is more important than squabbling over particulars of ideology at this point. Look, it's easy to forget you're a real person when you've got such a large following, and the interactions between us are practically always one-sided. There are people you have associated with that appear suspicious, and we know for a fact that people in our circles are on the payroll of foreign intelligence and other spooky organizations, so it's not completely crazy to have suspicions, but I've always hoped that you were a genuine guy despite the quote that you just provided. So I will say again, I'm sorry. Good luck fighting for the Irish." So, yeah, I'm starting to come to the opinion that anybody who is willing to put their face out there and defend our people and criticize and expose the Jews in their role of attacking our race. Anybody who does that has at least some, we owe them at least some amount of charity in the way that we approach them. And that accusing someone of being a Fed or a spook or on somebody's payroll is something that you can't do casually. I feel bad that I just threw that out casually with no evidence. And so yeah, anyway, I felt like it was more important, and I want to sort of set that as an example, hopefully, that we, Handsome Truth here too, calling him a vax bro and saying he's cooked. Handsome Truth is another kind of guy that's out there with his real face and doing things in his own way. And look, we're going to be stronger together. And even if we disagree, even if we have like ideological or philosophical differences or even political differences, if we're all standing up for our people and we're all going after and exposing and criticizing the people who are responsible for the devastation that's going on in our countries, we should, at the end of the day, after all of our arguments, after all of our fights and stuff, we should be able to still shake each other's hands, look each other in the eyes, and stand together, because we're going to be stronger together. And my hope genuinely is that one day the maybe 100, 200 of us that are out there will be able to gather at a conference after we win and create our new order. That's my greatest dream, is that one day when all the dust is settled and we somehow win, that all the people who have been at the cutting edge of restoring our people's pride in ourselves, restoring our culture to its position of predominance where it should be, and bringing to justice, or bringing to light, the crimes of the people who have done this to us, that all of us can get together and have a conference and shake each other's hands and pat each other on the back and get to work creating a new order. And that, maybe someday the intellectuals of the movement can hash out our differences and create some kind of new curriculum for schools in our new order. And that's the dream. That to me is the dream. And I don't want to burn bridges. I want us to be united. And after we defeat our common enemy, and after we restore our people's pride and our people's position of predominance in our own countries, then we can have our squabbles. And when we have our squabbles, we can make them as polemical as possible too. I have in the past defended polemics. I've in the past defended a bit of a kayfabe in this regard. It's fun to be assholes to each other sometimes. It's fun to have this kind of harsh banter. For me to call Keith Woods a Marxist dweeb, and for him to call me a conspiracy kook. And, I don't mind that. I find it entertaining. I find it fun. It makes the arguments interesting to me. And if you really believe in what you're saying, that's what you do. But at the end of the day, we got to see each other as brothers in a war against the people who are destroying our people. And so to me, it's if we can agree on that, I'm willing to shake hands and move forward. And I wouldn't have said these sorts of things, like acting all innocent and saying, "Oh, why me? Why'd you block me?" if I really believed that he was a Fed. So I had to acknowledge my hypocrisy. I had to apologize, and that's that. So I hope, Keith, if you're watching this, if you see this, if somebody clips it and sends it to you, I'm 100% genuine in what I'm saying here. I still think you're a Marxist dweeb, but I hope that, and I do believe that you're a genuine guy and that you're out to defend your people in Ireland. And I hope that we can, recognize that we're on the same team. And I won't accuse you of being a Fed anymore, or I won't even imply that, because I don't believe it. I don't have any evidence for it. There's no reason for me to believe it. So that's that. Settled. Move on. Except I do have evidence. Keith Woods, his real name is Keith O'Brien. Did you know that? Did you know that his real name is Keith O'Brien? And that O'Brien was one of the main antagonists in George Orwell's 1984? The man who brought Winston Smith back and sold him out to the party? There's your evidence, gentlemen. Anyway, let's move on. I'm joking. Let's move on. So, to the real topics tonight, Adam Green has written a nice little essay on Jay Dyer's transcendental argument for the existence of God. And I want to talk about it because I find it an interesting topic. It's a bit of a change of pace. And first, just to give us the context, let's see what No More News is quote tweeting here.
I will debate when they bring something of substance and stop acting like they know what they're talking about. I don't owe you a debate. I don't owe people debates. When you don't know, why would I debate people that don't know the literature or the material? Do you see how silly that is? It's like when Adam Green says, you need to debate me. Adam Green has not demonstrated a basic knowledge of basic critical thinking skills in the debates that he's done. So why would I do a debate with a person who can't debate? I will debate when they bring something of substance and stop acting like they know what they're talking about. I don't owe you a debate.
Okay, I thought that was going to have more information on his argument, but let's read what Adam Green said here. I'm going in blind. I haven't read this full post, so this will be a genuine first reaction here. Jay Dyer's entire transcendental presuppositional argument is built on a foundation as solid as wet tissue paper. His core move is to assume that the Orthodox Christian God is the necessary grounding for logic. Then he smugly proceeds to argue that logic proves the existence of this very same God. This isn't an argument. It's a laughably blatant circle jerk of intellectual dishonesty. Jay and his band of delusional orthobros are essentially saying, God exists because we've already decided that he must, and now let's go ahead and pretend that proves anything. Look, it doesn't take a PhD to see that when your premise and your conclusion are the same thing, you're running in circles faster than a hamster on a wheel. Dyer and his followers think that they've found some grand transcendental truth, but all they've really done is lock themselves in an echo chamber where they shout, God exists, and applaud each other when the echo bounces back. Let's be real here. The only reason Dyer gets away with this intellectual sleight of hand is because his fan base, the Orthobro cult, either doesn't understand logical fallacies or, worse, chooses to ignore them because they're too busy feeling superior to the rest of the world. They've deluded themselves into thinking they've won some philosophical high ground when, in reality, they're just chasing their own tails, congratulating themselves for making no progress whatsoever. Jay's so-called argument is nothing more than an elaborate game of make-believe. He assumes what he's trying to prove, then uses that assumption as proof. It's the same as me saying I'm always right because I say so, and you can't argue with me because my rightness is already established. It's pathetic, really. And the fact that his ortho-bro circle eats this up just shows that this isn't a community of thinkers. It's a cult of blind followers. They're not interested in logic. They're interested in validation for their pre-existing beliefs, and they'll contort logic into pretzels to get it. Stop pretending you've got some kind of intellectual edge. Your argument doesn't hold up under the weight of even a basic freshman-level philosophy class, let alone serious scrutiny. You're not defending truth. You're running a clown show for people who don't know any better. And your Orthobro fan base? They're cheering you on in your intellectual gymnastics, not realizing that they're all just stuck in a theological hamster wheel, spinning endlessly in the same delusional circles. So, where to begin? This actually is the main point that I would also make. And I would, here it is. When your premise and your conclusion are the same thing, you're running in circles. It's called a circular argument. This is the main point that has to be addressed over and over and over again with people who think that they can provide some kind of logical or deductive argument for the existence of God. There's a great little website here, which I've promoted in the past, called Fat Fist Fatty's Hub Pages. And he he has discussed this exact argument in the past, which Jay Dyer did not invent the transcendental argument for God. Fat Fist Fatty discusses the version of it given by a fellow called Matt Slick, who had a radio show, I don't know when, a while, years ago, decades ago even at this point, from carm.org. I wonder if this website's still up. Yep, Christian Apologetics and Research Ministry. So this is, I think, one of the best refutations of the transcendental argument for God. This anonymous author named Fat Fist Fatty is one of the greatest thinkers that I've come across in terms of ontology, logic, rationality that I've ever seen online. I can't recommend him more highly. So here he says, the transcendental argument for God asserts that logical absolutes exist and were ultimately authored by God. Here's a link to his argument. So let's see if it's 404. And I think the Wayback Machine is down. Oh no, it seems like it's back up. So let's see if we can get... Let's see, we can go all the way back to 2010. Let's get a random clip from 2010 here. A snapshot from 2010. Holy moly, this is not a standard deductive argument. I ain't going to read all that. Let's just see what Fat Fist says. The term logical absolutes is an oxymoron invented by Matt Slick. This terminology is nowhere to be found in academia, including the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. Why? Because logic is not absolute. Here is a reference from Wikipedia. Quote, logic is concerned with the patterns in reason that can help tell us if a proposition is true or not. However, logic does not deal with truth in an absolute sense, as for instance a metaphysician does. Logicians use formal languages to express the truths which they are concerned with, and as such, there is only truth under some interpretation, or truth within some logical system. This is key. Logic is always systemic. In other words, within the context of a predefined system of rules or axioms. Logic has its limitations. Axiomatic rules are predefined by humans for use in a specific context and can never be absolute. There are hundreds of systems of logic which are independent from each other and not absolute, such as classical, fuzzy, intuitionist, quantum, mathematics, etc. No atheist has ever refuted Slick's transcendental argument. Matt Slick is correct, and this is something Adam Green should pay attention to. Matt Slick is correct in stating that no atheist has been able to debunk his argument. And I am willing to go the extra mile and state that no atheist will ever be able to debunk Matt Slick's argument. Atheism is an irrational religion. There is no difference between a theist, an atheist, and an agnostic. All three are divorced from reality. The three believe in the existence, non-existence, or that it's not possible to know the existence or non-existence of X. Or they claim to lack belief in X. Some go even as far as saying that they can prove or disprove the existence of X, or that they have truth about the existence or non-existence of X. In nature's reality, these are ridiculous propositions. One's beliefs, disbeliefs, lack of beliefs, proofs, or truths have nothing to do with reality. Reality is observer independent. The existence of X, such as the moon, God, a star, Bigfoot, etc., does not depend on a human's feelings, emotions, beliefs, or lack thereof, intuition, wisdom, knowledge, truth, proof, experiment, or testimony. Something exists or not, irrespective of these observer-dependent positions. Existence falls exclusively in the field of study we call physics. Physics is the study of existence via the scientific method. In physics, we take the existence of God at face value as an actor, as a hypothesis. Then we try to rationally explain our theory of creation using God as the actor of the creation event. If the theory of creation is rational, then we can conclude that it is possible that God exists. If our critical analysis shows the theory of creation to be contradictory, then it is impossible for God to exist. It's that simple. There's no other option. So when it comes to the existence of an object in reality, we don't say that we're going to prove the object exists. We're not going to say that we're going to demonstrate logically that the argument or that the object exists. What we do is we say, let us assume that this object exists. And let us assume that for the purpose of explaining some phenomenon. That's the difference. Here's how a rational human can use their critical thinking skills to explain why it is impossible for a God to exist. And then he links to another article. If the so-called atheist is of the lack of belief position, then he is no different than a religionist who has belief. Lack of belief is a meaningless negative predicate, which has nothing to do with existence. Lack of belief is not even a coherent position. It is lame. It's no different than negative theology, where God is purported to have negative attributes, incorporeal, timeless, spaceless, etc. This stuff is the hallmark of religion, not of an intelligent human being. Atheism is a religion that has nothing to offer humanity. It cannot explain anything. It has no intellectual foundation to answer any questions regarding reality. I had the privilege to have a short debate with Matt Slick in the comments of my article here. Matt Slick is known for never losing any debate with an atheist, and I applaud him for that, because he is several notches higher on the intelligence scale than any atheist out there. I mean, he ate Matt Dillahunty for lunch on live TV for the Atheist Experience show. But Matt Slick was not as fortunate when he came here to argue. In the end, he abandoned his argument on logical absolutes because he had no rational argument to defend or justify his claims. I actually still encourage him to come back if he has any new arguments to offer. So here's the debate. Matt Slick says, I would assert the following as an absolute truth. It is always morally wrong for you to torture babies merely for your personal pleasure. This statement is either true or it is not true, which itself implies an absolute truth. If it is not true that the statement is either true or not true, then how would you demonstrate that the statement is or is not true? If you say that it is not true that the statement is either true or not true, then you are asserting an absolute truth about the statement. If you assert that the statement is not absolutely true, then you would need to demonstrate that it is not true. To do this, you would need to provide an absolute truth to the contrary, where it would be morally right for you to torture babies merely for your personal pleasure. But to do this is to assert an absolute truth. If you do try to prove the statement false, you are advocating the torture of babies merely for your personal pleasure. Are you absolutely sure that you want to do that in order to deny absolute truth? If, however, you provide a statement that proves that torturing babies for pleasure is false, then you are establishing an absolute truth. Namely, that it is absolutely true that there is a condition in which it is morally right for you to torture babies merely for your pleasure. However, if you cannot provide a falsification for the statement, then the statement stands as being an absolute truth. If you say that there are no moral truths by which the assertion can be validated or falsified, then you are offering an absolute truth that there are no moral truths by which the assertion can be validated or falsified, and this refutes your position. If you say that the statement is ridiculous, illogical, stupid, or isn't a proper subject of examination, then you are admitting you cannot refute it, because if you could, you would. So what's the response to that? Seems like it. How do you get around that? How do you respond? If no matter what you do, it seems, no matter what you do, he's right. If you say that it's true, then obviously he's right. If you say that it's false, then you're making an absolute truth claim, and therefore absolute truth exists, and therefore he's right. You're stuck. No matter what you do, he's right. How does Fat Fist respond? Fat Fist says, Matt, is it always morally wrong for you to torture babies merely for your personal pleasure? That's a quote from Matt. Morals are opinions. They are subject to one's personal taste, i.e., you are judging the behavior of another, hence subjective, i.e., opinion. What is morally right for you is morally wrong for your neighbor. Morality is resolved through consensus of opinion. The statement is either true or it is not true. Another quote from Matt. So wait, let's stop here. Morality is resolved through consensus of opinion. I happen to agree with this, and I know that there's people out there who will disagree with me. And in terms of, speaking with normies, speaking with the average person in public, I would say that certain things are morally right and wrong, without the qualification that it's my opinion. To me, the difference between a mere opinion and a moral opinion is that the moral opinion is one which you are willing to enforce with violence, potentially deadly violence. A moral opinion of mine, for example, is abusing my children is wrong. If somebody were to, let's say, slap my child in public, I believe that that's wrong. It's my opinion. Obviously, the other person has a different opinion where they think it's right or okay to slap my child if they do that. But because it's a moral opinion of mine, if that happens, I am going to use violence to stop it from happening or to punish the person for doing it. That doesn't make it any less of an opinion of mine, but it makes it the type of opinion that I am willing to use violence to enforce. That's why we have the two different concepts. That's why it's distinguished from a mere opinion. But it is still a subcategory of an opinion. And another thing about morality that makes it different from a mere opinion, such as, I like chocolate ice cream, you like strawberry ice cream, is a moral opinion, in order to have weight in a society, relies on consensus. And consensus is based on, I think, biology. When you have a nation where everybody is biologically related, consensus is a lot easier to generate. If you have a tribe or a nation or a clan, one of the things that makes it possible for a moral consensus to be to manifest, to come into being, to be meaningful in the world, is that the nation, tribe, clan is homogeneous, biologically speaking. Which is one reason why race realism is so important, and why national homogeneity at the biological level is so important, why diversity is so destructive to a society. Because when you have a society that is diverse to the extent that a moral consensus cannot be generated, you end up devolving into chaos. So someone like Jay Dyer would say, oh, the world would be a better place if everybody was Christian and everybody abided by basically the moral opinions of the Jews, since Christianity is essentially a Judaic religion. So this is the universalism that comes along with a religion like Christianity. The whole world would be better off if everybody in the world followed this one universal moral code. But the way I see it is that's basically impossible. It's impossible in any scenario other than what the Kalergi plan is basically advocating, other than a mixed mass of gray people who have no race, basically a mass of Mishlings at the bottom with a core like ruling caste at the top. So you have like the ruling race and the diverse, diluted, mixed, nothing people at the bottom. That to me seems like the only biological scenario wherein a universal morality could be generated, a consensus of universal, and even then it would be sloppy. You need the master race on top to enforce on the chaotic masses this consensus, and it will always be done through totalitarian force. That's the only way it's possible. But in a natural system, one that for all of history humans have been self-organizing into, and the system that I believe is the most conducive to our nature as a race, to any race's nature, is for the races to be separate, for different nations to be separate, and for those different nations to have their own consensus of morality that evolved and manifested on the basis of their homogeneity. So that's why having different nations is so important. That's why separating the races and being homogenous within your nation is so important, because that's how a natural consensus of morality is able to develop. That's the foundation upon which a natural consensus of morality can be generated. So that's a long tangent on the question of morality, but let's carry on. The statement is either true or it is not true. So you are qualified. This is another quote from Matt. Fat Fist's reply. So you are qualifying opinion/morals as either true or not true. In that case, your definition of the word truth, which you have yet to provide, would be subjective, as it resolves to nothing but opinion. Your use of the concept of truth requires an observer to make a decision based upon their personal tastes on the issue at hand. But Matt, you are welcome to provide an objective definition for the word truth, so that the audience understands what you are talking about whenever you invoke this crucial term which makes or breaks your argument. Truth is another thing like morality, I believe. You cannot have a universal truth. There's basically, truth is another example of another argument for homogeneous nations, because a general outlook on reality, a general perspective, point of view on reality, depends upon the biological homogeneity of a nation. Like the Jews see everything as mathematical. They like to see reality as being just like purely mathematical. And that's because of their own instincts, because of their own racial history. That's not the case for other people. So truth is very similar in this regard. Here's another quote from Matt Slick, which itself implies an absolute truth. No, it implies an absolute opinion, Fatfist says, as per your statements above. All you've said so far is that truth and morals are synonyms for opinion. But please feel free to enlighten the audience by providing an objective definition for truth. This would allow you to instantly resolve the issue. If you say that the statement is ridiculous, a quote from Matt says, if you say that the statement is ridiculous, illogical, stupid, or isn't the proper subject of examination, then you are admitting you cannot refute it. Fatfist responds, nah, haven't said any of that, and they are irrelevant to the instant issue. Your argument for absolute truth is self-refuting because it is predicated on truth equals opinion. But you are welcome to show otherwise. Just define the term which makes or breaks your argument, okay? Truth. Blank space. Matt Slick responds, if you say that morals are just opinions, then you are only giving your opinion that morals are just opinions, which is the fallacy of begging the question and does not refute the torturing babies for mere pleasure principle. In addition, to say that morals are just opinions is an absolute statement, since it must mean that all morals are just opinions, and that this would imply a universal truth, which again refutes the idea that there are not absolute truths. If this were not true, that morals were opinions, then the torturing babies principle is true, unless you can prove it false, and refutes the idea that there are not truth absolutes. Furthermore, to say that morals are just opinions is to say that the morality of the torturing babies for mere pleasure is only up to someone's opinion, and that you'd be supporting the idea that due to a person's subjective moral code, it would be morally good for him to torture babies merely for his personal pleasure. Is that what you want to advocate? Like I said, this doesn't follow. Just saying that it's an opinion doesn't mean that you want it to happen. Doesn't mean that it's your opinion. As far as what truth is, there are different appeals. Coherence theory, correspondence theory, consensus theory, linguistic theory. So instead of debating what truth really is, red herring, tell us all what you believe truth is, and I will work with that. So now Matt is telling Fatfist to define truth. Fatfist challenges him to define truth, and he basically says, how about you define truth? Fatfist responds, Matt, quote from Matt, if you say that morals are just opinions, Fat Fist responds, no, it is you and your argument which is saying that morals are opinions. What is morally right to you is morally wrong to someone else. What part don't you understand? All I have to do is find one person who disagrees with your torturing babies from your pleasure statement, one whose tastes are different than yours, one whose morals are different than yours. And since his morals are different than yours, who is right and who is wrong? And there are people out there who torture babies for mere pleasure. I mean, look at the Podestas. Look at everyone involved in Pizzagate. Question: what objective means do you use to resolve this? Answer: there are no objective means. Everyone's morals are different. This means that your torturing babies from your pleasure statement can only possibly be resolved to that of one's opinion and nothing else. And this is I don't know how anyone can argue with this. There are people out there for a fact. There are people out there who torture babies for mere pleasure. They exist. They exist. Look into Pizzagate if you don't believe me. So how do you deal with a person like that? There's no logical argument you can give that will convince them to change their opinion, to change their morality. There's no logical argument. All you can do is have conviction in your morality such that you are willing to use violence to stop them from doing what they're doing. And at that point, it's not a battle of right and wrong. It's not a battle of true and false. It's a battle of me versus you. It's a battle of us versus them. And in nature, in reality, that's all that's happening. It's a different, basically, survival of the fittest. It's a might makes right scenario. And that's the only way that these issues get resolved in reality. There's no magical deductive argument that will prove to these people that they're wrong and have them change their opinions. The only way to deal with it is through force. And force is not a logical argument. Jack of Clover says, just because logic does not sway evil people does not mean logic doesn't exist or cannot be reasonably derived from natural circumstances. Those people who torture babies are natural. They're part of nature. They're just as natural as a lion or a tiger eating a gazelle. They're just as natural. But so are we. And we are natural forces competing with other natural forces for dominance, for supremacy. And that's all that's really happening in reality. But you have to be okay with this position, you have to feel it within yourself, a sense of righteousness, a sense of power in asserting what you think is right in the world. And a sense of, like I said with the nation, a sense of consensus with your peers, with your equals, that you are going to impose upon others and impose upon the world what you and your people believe is right. If you disagree, then please define this crucial term, Fat Fist continues, morals, the crucial term, morals, which makes or breaks your argument. Then we'll both know whether your definition resolves to opinion or not, okay? Here you go. Morals, blank space. Fill in the blank. Another quote from Matt, then you are only giving your opinion that morals are just opinions, which is the fallacy of begging the question. No, this is Your fallacy, Fatfist says. You are using circular reasoning and surreptitiously making an argument from ignorance in the hopes that the audience won't notice. But you fool no one. Whether the concept of morals resolves to opinion or not is objectively settled when the proponent of the argument, you, defines this crucial term to show that morals are resolved without injecting the opinion or subjectivity of a human observer. Got it? I already explained to you that your torturing babies from your pleasure statement may be morally right for you, but completely rejected as wrong by another person. This means that your use, i.e., operational definition of the term morals, in your argument is predicated upon opinion and opinion alone. Which part are you having trouble with? Tell me, and I'll explain it to you with the luxury of detail. Now, what I would add on to this, that the argument is predicated by opinion, that your morals are just mere opinion. What I would add on to this is that this is why we need homogeneity. This is why race needs to be recognized and ethnicity needs to be recognized, because that is the greater foundation. That's what makes it more than just your opinion. That's what makes it more than just your taste. Because you become essentially part of a species, part of an existing biological collective that is like a force of nature in the world. And it's not just you acting, it's your greater collective that you're representing. That's why we need race realism. That's why we need ethnic homogeneity within a country. And that's why losing homogeneity is so destructive to a society. If that weren't the case, if it weren't the case that morality, like a moral consensus, depends upon ethnic homogeneity, then we wouldn't be seeing the breakdown of our culture and our society as a whole with diversity. And it's not just like these crazy, killing babies type thing. Most humans agree that killing and torturing babies is not a good thing. There are some humans out there who are especially degenerate and do this kind of thing. But it's not just these like crazy extreme examples. It's even things like etiquette. It's small things. It's all of the little, from, if you make like a sliding scale of the types of opinions that people are willing to enforce on each other. You've got all the way on the end, you've got mere opinion, which is just what flavor ice cream you like. Then next to that, you've got etiquette. What's polite, what's rude. The types of things that you enforce through just like mere, like a dirty look, or calling someone rude, or a cold shoulder, or whatever. Then you've got ethics, I think, that comes farther toward the extreme, where people enforce ethics through things like ostracization or minor punishments on people, or the punishments become more harsh. But then all the way at the end, you've got like hard morality, like thou shalt not rape my wife, thou shalt not smack my children, thou shalt not, these sorts of hard moral questions, which are telling somebody, we're not just going to give you the cold shoulder or a dirty look like it's etiquette. We're not just going to ostracize you or give you a mild punishment like it's ethics. We are going to destroy you if you do this. You are going to die if you do this. That is the end of morality. That's the final stage. That's the pinnacle of morality, is telling somebody you will be destroyed if you do this. I am willing personally with my hands to end your life if you do this. That is, to me, the ultimate definition of a moral opinion. And if a society as a whole has a consensus on that, then they basically like self-purify. They self-purify all the other organisms that don't abide by this code, and they generate, a self-fulfilling consensus. Hey, what's up, Johnny? Johnny's in the chat. So carrying on, Fat Fist continues, read my lips. Whether morals equal opinions or not is an issue that is objectively settled by defining the key term which makes or breaks your argument. This term, which you must define, is morals. And the onus is on you to show the audience that your definition of morals does not resolve to one's personal taste, subjectivity, opinion, etc. So here you go. Morals. Blank. Since it must mean that all morals are just opinions, and this would imply a universal truth. Another quote from Matt. Fat Fist replies, no, you are missing the boat. This is not an issue of truth, lies, belief, etc. This is an issue that falls squarely on the definition of the key term, which makes or breaks your argument, morals. And by the way, your operational definition of the term truth also resolves to opinion, as I explained to you in my last post, and you have yet to define objectively truth. Matt says, furthermore, to state that morals are just opinions is to say that the morality of the torturing babies for your pleasure principle is only up to someone's opinion. Exactly. This is exactly what your argument resolves to, Fat Fist says. If you would like your argument to state otherwise, all you have to do is define morals objectively, where this term does not resolve to someone's personal taste, subjectivity, opinion, etc. So here you go, morals. Fill in the blank. And finally, another quote from Matt. And you'd be supporting the idea that due to a person's subjective moral code, it would be morally good for him to torture babies merely for his personal pleasure. Is that what you want to advocate? Fat Fist says, what I support and what I advocate is completely irrelevant to this argument. Subjectivity plays no role here. Arguments should be objective and not invoke the opinions of observers. Arguments from opinion, authority, popularity, red herrings, you-tos or me-tos, etc., shall not divert the proponent's responsibility from demonstrating to the audience that their definition of their key term, morals, does not resolve to one's opinion, especially since their operational use of this term thus far has demonstrated the opposite. And so this is a long back and forth. If you'd like to, they go around in circles for a while. But the point here is that Matt never gives a clear definition of truth. He never gives a clear definition of morals, because ultimately Fat Fist is right. Ultimately, it does boil down to a person's subjectivity. And that's okay, though. That's okay, because when we realize that subjectivity can be shared within an ethnic group, that there's something I would call ethnic subjectivity or racial subjectivity that makes it essentially a force of nature in the world, then we start to recognize more clearly why homogeneity is so important, and also why I think having this idea that morality is objective and universal leads us to doing the sorts of things that Christians have done for centuries, which is going all around the world trying to convince every race that they need to follow our rules, that they need to follow, these universal moral codes, and basically believing that any two people are interchangeable, and that the interchangeability is based on this fact that, or this idea that morals are objective. I don't think that everybody is interchangeable. I don't think that every race should follow the same morals and ethics. I don't care what some fucking dude in New Guinea does. I don't care if they're cannibals, as long as they stay the hell away from our race and our territory. I don't care what the Chinese do over in China, as long as they stay the hell away from our race and our territory. And when conflict happens, I don't want to take over and convert the Chinese into a white European. I would want to either just, destroy them and take over the space for ourselves, or get them to leave us the hell alone. I mean, it depends on what we want as a nation. But that's the point. That's when it comes to morality. That's my understanding. So let's see if they get into any other. Well, let's just go back here. Let's go back to Does anyone know if Jay Dyer has like a written syllogism for his transcendental argument? Otherwise, I'll kind of leave it at there and move on, because we're at the point where we're circling the same things, or at least I'm repeating myself. Millennial woes style. And I think I've talked about Logic in particular in the past, also using Fat Fist, because he's who I learned these arguments from. I want to give him full credit. Fat Fist also talks about, this is the same. I wonder if I could find the spot where they talk about logic, because it's important to understand logic too. That logic is purely a predefined system invented by people to basically establish whether or not ideas within the system are self-consistent. A true deductive argument never provides any new information. A true deductive argument is always a repackaging of initial premises. So I'd recommend reading through Fat Fist's articles on logic if you're interested in these ideas, because it's important to understand. It's here. This is the way he puts it. Logic is nothing more than a predefined, context-based system of derivational inference. It's always derivational, it's always context-based, and it's always dependent on predefined axioms. Two types of logic. Deductive and inductive. Deductive reasoning consists of deriving our conclusions directly from the premises, without adding any new assertions to the conclusion. All conclusions must be traceable directly back to the specified premises. And to inductive, this reasoning consists of generalizing, extrapolating, or attributing probability to principles, empirical facts, observed phenomena, etc. A popular example is to say the sun will rise tomorrow. It always has, so there's no reason to think it won't. This is not the type of argument that a transcendental argument for God is making. It's supposed to be, it's marketed as a deductive argument. Because everybody knows inductive arguments like the sun will rise tomorrow may be proven false. We all know that there's a possible chance that an asteroid can hit the Earth at some point in the future and just destroy it. There's an inevitability that at some point the sun will burn out and the sun will not rise anymore. So we all know that inductive arguments, even though we might believe one, you might believe an inductive argument, it's not like logically like universally true. Oh God, we got someone. Asteroids do not exist. Okay, but you understand that it's like at some point the sun may not rise in the future for any number of reasons. So logic does not prove, logic only infers. How does logic work? By explicit assumption of statements, i.e. premises, and the implicit derivation of conclusions. The conclusions are inferred from the assumptions. This is worth repeating. Logic is a system of inference which works by way of explicit assumption and implicit derivation. Logic necessarily requires that you explicitly posit certain assumptive statements, premises, axioms, assertions. These will form the basis of your so-called logical argument. After you derive conclusions which stem directly from your assumptions, some will say that you have logically proven your argument directly from your premises. Question. Surely some can say what they want, but what did you really prove? Answer. You have proved nothing. You have only inferred via induction or deduction. Most people unwittingly use the term proof while not understanding its implications. Proof implies certainty, even though certainty is impossible to attain. Logic cannot offer any alleged certainty. Infer implies derivation. Logic can only derive an assumed conclusion from its premises. Proof and infer are two different concepts. Never the twain shall meet. Okay, I recommend reading the rest of this article. Read the whole thing. Read the comments. Fat Fist used to be like half of this scrolling is just comments. He was a prolific commenter and responder to comments. So anyway, once again, Adam Green, if you watch this, if you check this out, consider these points of approach for someone like Jay Dyer, because, especially with logic, I'm sure, debating morality with Jay Dyer probably won't go very well. I don't think, these Christian moralists are not interested in being told that morality is an opinion. But logic, I think, is kind of the best thing to attack when it comes to like convincing the audience. So the idea that he's going to logically prove the existence of anything with logic is a silly kind of like misuse of logic, misunderstanding of logic, abuse of logic, dare I say. So that's what I got on that. Now, AA says, thank you for apologizing to Keith. Germ. I've been an admirer of the two of you for some time. We don't have enough resources for infighting. You're both brave public figures. Same team. Thank you. I agree. Now, how long have I been going for here? Do I even have hour and a half? Yeah, let's get into the when Scotland was Jewish question. So this critique was linked to me by a commenter on my previous video. It's on freepages.rootsweb.com. Awash in Inference by Andrew M. Cohen. Or Cowen. A critique of the book When Scotland Was Jewish by Hirschman and Yates. The stated intent of this book is to assemble historic, genealogical, linguistic, archaeological, and geographic evidence, combined with the relatively new technique of Y-DNA analysis to open a new perspective on the history of Scotland, that most of Scottish history and culture was of Jewish origin. I don't agree with that. In addition, I don't think it's most of Scottish history and culture, but crucial elements of it. And I do believe that the majority of average Scotsmen and the majority of what we consider Scottish culture, just overall, our stereotypes and our overall impression of Scottish culture, is native Celtic. So keep that in mind. But in addition, its further purpose is to create a better understanding of the great diversity and origins of the Scottish population, dispelling the view of Orthodox historians of the prevalence of the Celtic population in Scotland. The authors of this book paint an image of themselves as two researchers on a voyage of discovery, sailing into a scholarly and historical breach on board a hypothesis of Jewish Scotland, observing signs missed by everyone for 400 years. They are brave enough to have embarked on such a fragile and leaky vessel, with their banner "Scotland was Jewish" waving like the Jolly Roger, with its telltale Jewish crossbones high on the mast. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of pirates were Jewish, like famous pirates. Anyway, that's a completely different. So, okay, here's the start of his argument. One of his main sections. He admits here at the bottom, by the way, he admits that this review leaves most of the book untouched. So there's only a few like main points that he gets into here. The first is this idea of Cowain, that surname being a slur or like a regional alteration of Cohen, the Jewish priest name. And he argues that that's not necessarily the case, and gives an alternative etymology of that name, but this is not really, it's not quite the strongest argument to make, to just say that there's a different possible etymology. He says that one of the arguments that the book makes is that John Cowain, the dean of the Sterling Merchants Guild, was possibly Jewish, or like lends some weight to the idea that he was Jewish because of the fact that he built a hospital to care for aged guild brothers, which they argue was unusual at the time in Scotland, but was found regularly in Jewish communities all over Europe. This author says that there's no evidence offered to show that this was an unusual practice in Scotland. But there is some evidence that it was unusual. The first is if we look at something called the Davidic Revolution, which is a concept, or Davidian Revolution, which is a concept in Scottish history that shows that the first king in Scotland to create things such as monasteries, Normanizing the Scottish government, introducing feudalism, bringing immigrants from the Norman areas of northern Europe, creating cities, the foundation of the first burghs. These all came from King David I in Scotland. And prior to King David I, there are a number of and I know this is centuries before Cowain's hospital, but King David I is another major historical figure that is being accused of being a crypto. And I'm trying to find here, but I believe I read that he was the first to create hospitals and institutions for like caring for like poor and sick women or orphans or things like that, allegedly. So there seems to be, in my opinion, some slight connection there. And I believe that like these charitable organizations that were created by you-know-whos and are created today by the you-know-whos. A lot of charities today are created by Jews. A lot of them are run by Jews. A lot of these charitable organizations, feeding people in Africa, or caring for orphans or things of that nature, are run by Jews for nefarious purposes. So I don't think I'll be able to find it. Well, I'm going to have a presentation for the next live stream where we can really get into the arguments from the book in more detail. I'm going to try to create like a presentation so I don't have to spend time searching through pages like this. But once again, not conclusive. Oh, we'll talk about him in just a second. It's not a conclusive argument, but it's just one of those things that's like you start stacking everything up together and it paints a big picture that's hard to ignore. Then he talks about Kabbalistic imagery in the Guild Hospital building, and Kabbalistic imagery on his on Cowain's tombstone, which he provides some alternative explanation to. He says, there is no evidence to be found in web searches that the symbol was of ancient Kabbalah origin. Rather, the sign of 4, which is this one. This one right here. Is considered to have evolved from an early Christian symbol, Chi Rho, XP, standing for Christos Rex in Greek letters. In medieval times, it was simplified to a reverse 4. The marks are thought to have originated among Flemish merchants and worked their way to Scotland. The authors, however, have misinterpreted the gravestone engraving as something secretly indicating Jewish origins of the merchant. Now, John may have had Flemish roots, and he may also have been a Jewish merchant, but a more sensible explanation, based on common trade practices, would seem more likely. Common trade practices at the time were commonly Jewish. That's the first thing that we need to understand. The second thing is we start, as we work our way through this critique, we start to see that each of these details requires various sort of ex post facto explanations. Like, oh, the name Cowain sounds like Cohen, but it could be this other etymology. Or, oh, this type of charity practice that was really common among Jewish communities. It could have also been happening in Scotland without the influence of the Jews. And, oh, this figure that has, a resemblance to some Kabbalistic imagery, and was associated with, Flemish merchants and Jewish merchants and stuff like that. Well, that could have just been a common trade practice. And then we get to the holy blood altar is another one. So each and every one of these details requires some sort of like ex post facto alternative explanation by this critic. Whereas it seems like Occam's razor, if we can have one explanation that incorporates all of these details into a succinct, oh shit, we got folk survival. We've summoned folk survival here. How you doing? Good to see you around, man. Somebody told me that on a previous stream that you I don't know, that you had some issue with me, but unlock the power. That's the old the OG. Anyway, so it seems like if we get all these different details that have an elegant single explanation, that it's more likely that one explanation that covers all the details with a single theory is more likely than having to like grasp at straws for every one of these explanations or every one of these details to come up with a new and different explanation for each detail. It just seems more likely if there's one theory that explains them all, rather than having to come up with 4 or 5 different theories to explain each each detail separately. The one thing I will give this critic is, in the book, they mention this Prince Michael Stuart, who claims to be a descendant of the Stuart family. And in an interview, I think like back in like 2001 or whatever, a while ago, this Prince Michael Stuart claimed that the Stuarts were of Davidic descent. Turns out Prince Michael Stuart was a fraud. He wasn't actually a member of the family, and the birth certificate that he had was proven to be fraudulent, and then he fled the country. That's true. That's a good point to bring up. However, what's also true is we don't need Prince Michael Stuart to claim that the Stuarts were descended from David when we have like medieval manuscripts where these people claimed to be descended from King David. And the common explanation that, here's a list that ChatGPT gave me, 2 of which are from Scotland, the Book of Deer and the Chronicum Scotorum. So we don't need a fake prince to tell us that the Stuarts believed that they were descended from David when we have contemporary medieval chronicles where these people were claiming to be descended from David. And like I was going to say, the common explanation for this is that, they wanted to legitimize their rule by linking them to a biblical figure. But in what world is it more legitimizing to associate yourself with a foreign ruler, a foreign figure in history? That doesn't make it, unless the Jews were a powerful force in society and everybody knew it. Trying to associate yourself with their kings makes no sense. So, yeah, we don't need Prince Michael Stuart to be legit for us to know that these ancient rulers thought of themselves as being descendants of David. We can skip over this. This is more claims from the fake Prince Michael. Oh, but to go back to one other thing before I move on to something else. Cowayne's Hospital. Cowayne's Hospital, with this merchant John Cowayne, that's being discussed in this criticism, it contains an interesting statue. A statue that was built by a contemporary of John Cowayne, and his name was John Milne. So we have another from the previous stream. You remember John Stuart Mill. His father was originally named Milne. So here we have a John Milne, possibly a ancestor of John Stuart Mill. And Milne, look at him. I mean, come on. Can anyone look at this and tell me that there's not like some, you look at that. I see, you know who I see when I look at that? I see oh, what's his name? Who's that actor? Who the fuck is that actor? He was in like Superbad. the fat one in Superbad? Who was the fat actor in Superbad? Jonah Hill. I look at John Milne and I see the Jew Jonah Hill. Tell me that there's not a fucking resemblance there. And I'm sure that there's other better examples but he looks potentially Jewish. He looks if at a glance, if I saw this guy walking down the street, I would think Jewish rather than Scottish. And even look at the little like statue that he's painted with. So the mason who constructed Cohen's Hospital, John Milne, kind of looks Jewish. But more importantly to the case of Cohen, or Cohen, is that John Milne, who was a contemporary of Cohen, who built this within Cohen's lifetime, made this statue of John Cohen, and look at how he's represented, man. God damn it. Look at that. Does that look like a Scotsman? Look at how dark they made him. So, I thought that was kind of funny. Once again, not proof, but details that have to be taken into consideration here. Now, I think that's all I had for this. I think that's all I had to respond to in this critique. Yeah, then he talks about the Y-DNA analysis, which I think he rightly points out that the authors of the book include R1A1 as a haplogroup for the Jews. And it is true that Jews exist with the R1A1 haplogroup. But it is also admitted that this R1A1 and R1B haplogroup were conversos to Judaism, essentially. These were not like original founding haplogroups of Judaism the way that E or G are, or J. That these were basically Europeans that, for whatever reason, converted to Judaism. So it's definitely not like a clear proof of Jewish ancestry if someone has R1A or R1B. That's kind of silly to think. But it is interesting that there's like a branch of Jews that are Levites, the Ashkenazi Levites, that have an R1A haplogroup. And it kind of reminds me of the whole like Khazar theory It's like the Eastern European ancestry of the Ashkenazi Levites. A lot of them have Y haplogroups that kind of like show that they were Jewish converts, or at least that they were spawned from a Native European forefather through intermarriage with Jewish women, potentially. So, different topic altogether. But as this person admits, he didn't really touch on a lot of the arguments in the book. And some of the things that he says are worth noting. Other things I think are easily refuted, or at least easily argued against. And what I want to do in the next stream is to prepare a sort of a quick presentation, well, not a quick one, but maybe like a 45-minute presentation giving the main arguments in that book, and we can analyze together whether or not the big picture is believable. So that's what I look forward to doing on the next stream, which today is Wednesday. I'd like to do this next stream Friday, possibly Sunday, depending on how much work I can get done in my free time in the next couple days. So Folk Survival says Alfred Milner of the British Empire. Let's look him up real quick. I've definitely heard this name before. Definitely heard this name. I don't know what he's famous for, though. I can't remember. His father was Charles Milner, a London physician with a German mother and an English father. The Round Table, somebody says. Oh, he was close with Lord Cecil. Cecil Rhodes. Oh, God. Look at that physiognomy. Man, that is the type of guy that looks like an asshole. That guy is not someone I'd want to meet. Fucking stares right through you. Yeah, so the Rhodes Scholarship and all that kind of stuff is connected with Cecil Rhodes and Milner. Interesting. Well, all right, fellas, I gotta take off. It's 11:34 where I'm at, and I got work in the morning. Such is life. You guys have a good night. Thank you all for coming, and I'm looking forward to the next stream. Hopefully this is the last time I have to apologize to someone. I don't like apologizing to people. I don't like to do it, but I'll do it when I have to. But everybody, you guys have a good night, and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.